Hello there, everybody. I am Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach. I'm the founder of the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program. I'm the author of these beautiful 6 books here over my left and right shoulder. And I'm also the creator of No Hassle Newsletters. My extraordinary Done-For-You newsletter program has been used by over 1,200 small business owners in 9 countries. But most importantly, today, I'm the host of Dream Business Radio, now in its 10th year. This is episode 529, 529. Wow. And I want to wish you all a very happy and healthy and prosperous new year, and welcome back. We've had, I guess, 2 weeks off, maybe 3, I think 2 for the holidays and moving and my back. But welcome to another fantastic live edition of Dream Business Radio. I have such a great guest today, Brad Szollose, and I've been practicing his name for 10 years. Brad Szollose. How you doing today, Brad?
Incredible. Hey, I wanted to do your intro. It's like, welcome to Dream Business Radio with Captain Jim Palmer.
Because you've done voiceovers for the stars and all that stuff.
I have actually.
Oh my God, you got such a resume. I've been really looking forward to this. Anyway, let me do a little business here, and then we'll dive in. Because honestly, folks, Brad and I were in the green room waiting for the old countdown clock, and I said, "Oh God, there's 3 seconds left," because we're talking up a storm. Anyway, folks, this episode of Dream Business Radio is brought to you by the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program. If you are an entrepreneur, small business owner, if you're tired of slow to no growth in your business, if you're feeling overwhelmed, unfocused, but especially if you are interested in learning how to create multiple streams of revenue, which is the way to create a very good, healthy income, which will lead to freedom in your business, in your personal life, then you want to check out the Dream Business Mastermind. It's about 27 entrepreneurs right now, led by me, Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach. You can learn more at dreambizcoaching.com. That is dreambizcoaching.com. All right, let me tell you a little bit about Brad. This is going to be a little hard for me because if I read his real professional bio, his head's going to swell up real big. So now he deserves it. Brad Szollose. He is Brad, and I'm trying to do your voice. He is a serial entrepreneur, a former C-level executive at an award-winning business author. One of Brad's startups was an awesome agency named K2 Design, which is pretty cool. It became a publicly traded company on NASDAQ in an IPO. As a result, Brad was thrust into the limelight as a .com executive. .com executive at a fairly early age, and he's been featured in Forbes, Inc. magazine, Advertising Age, Crane's Business Week. He has also appeared on international television shows, podcasts, other media outlets, culminating with his live appearance today on Dream Business Radio. That'll now be on his resume. Brad is the award-winning author of a fantastic book called Liquid Leadership, and he's the host of the very popular podcast Awakened Nation, where he interviews today's cutting-edge outliers and entrepreneurs, including yours truly. Just last week, I was very honored to be the guest there. Bradley, once again, how you doing? Welcome to Dream Business Radio.
Jim, hey, it's an honor to be on the show. And man, this is going back to a decade now. We've known each other a decade.
Yeah, I was going to say we met each other 10 years ago at the 75th anniversary of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. We were both asked to do a keynote at this, like a 2 or 2.5 day event. And anyway, that event was almost life-changing for me. And I know for you, it was also one of your early endeavors, keynoting a major event. But, Brad, before we dive into it, I know as an award-winning author, you get asked all the time for interviews. So I'm grateful you came on my show. But, the thing is, I like to start out before we get into nuts and bolts strategy and all that. I really know, I believe, but I've also been told, which is how I know, that my audience loves a little bit of the backstory, because in addition to strategy and what works, they love the inspiration, because sometimes we all need to just know that, oh my gosh, I'm right there now where he was. And so I can hang on too. So I know any entrepreneur that has accomplished any level of success at all has had their fair share of failure or testing, or shall we say things that didn't go according to plan. Give us a little bit of backstory, how you became an entrepreneur, and maybe how you dealt with some of the early setbacks, which I know you had.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny. We always look at the successes and we never look at the failures and how we learn from those. And that's actually how he started. My father was the first generation Hungarian, born here in the United States from my immigrant grandparents. So, if you know anything about Hungarians and anybody born during the Great Depression, I was born during the Great Depression because
Okay.
my dad was so cheap in the 70s. Asking him for $1, $20, whatever, was so horrifying, Jim, that it was easier to start a business. Think about that. So I started my first business at 16 accidentally with friends of mine who we did DJ work. That's all we did. We got two turntables and we had speakers and I had an amplifier and we ran around. And that first business taught me simple marketing, profit and loss. And so I cut my IT on that, my teeth on that. And then years later,
You
I
cut
get
your IT teeth.
IT
Is-
teeth on that. Yeah. Because imagine that. I mean, this was back way before CDs, any kind of technology. Everything was analog. So we had actual albums, record albums. So some of you may be young.
Carrying crates of
Yes,
albums out the
you got it.
wazoo.
Yeah, and it was insane. And we didn't make that much money. I mean, it was gas money, but I learned the basics of business. And so moving on years later, I wound up going to college for art and design, graphic design, illustration. And I get to New York City and I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna make it big in New York, man. And here
Like
I am.
Rhoda.
I got my dad's suitcase from 1942. You remember those light brown leather ones with the white stitching?
Yeah.
The only thing was missing was a fedora, and a baggy suit. And so this is like 1984. I get to New York City. My best friend that I grew up with, he actually moved to New York City. He picked me up. I stayed at his apartment for a couple of weeks, and I interviewed for jobs, and I got a job. And it was weird, but for the next 4 years, whenever they had to make cutbacks, they always went to the art department, and we were doing corporate art. So it was like annual reports, laying out, print and design. And I accidentally wound up doing whatchamacallit, I wound up doing graphic design for big corporate meetings where they were projected on the screen. And
Wow.
so after about 4 years of being hired and fired, let go because their budget, the first people to go. And I said, you know what, screw this. And I started my second business, which was me being a freelance artist, basically offering
Hmm.
my talents, working on some of the most amazing projects ever. And I did that for many, many years, freelancing and, getting my skills up there, getting a name for myself. After about 10 years of this, one of my buddies from college, Doug Cleek, he looks at me and he goes, well, we used to hang out and he'd introduce me to clients. And one Christmas, around the Christmas holidays, we went out to dinner with one of his clients. And he's driving me home because we lived in the same neighborhood. And he looked at me and he said, I want to start a business with you. And
Wow.
I had started another business before that and gotten burned because I had a business partner that didn't have any ambition, would disappear for weeks, take money out of the bank. And I'm like, enough with this crap. And I looked at Doug and I said, you have to prove to me that, you know, give me a reason, 3 reasons why the hell I should go into business with you. I was really snarky back then. And he came back a week later with like 10 reasons. And I was like, okay, you had me at number 4.
You had
Yeah,
me at hello.
yeah. So it was one of those moments. So we started planning, and this was the most amazing piece of kismet, serendipity or God wink, whatever you want to call it. But he comes over to my house and we're going through names. And you remember back in the 90s, this is 93. We were thinking of very waspy names like Bradley Douglas, our first names,
Mm.
agency. And we're thinking with all these things. And we had 50 names, Jim. I mean, 50 on a sheet. And we were so excited, proud of ourselves.
Because your
And
name and logo is so important.
yes, yeah. And so as we're leaving, he's leaving my apartment and he's walking out. I look up and there's a photo I had taken up on a mountain we had climbed together. And I said, take a look at that list, relax with it. Naming a company is important, but it's not important. But it,
Hmm.
it has to feel right for the partners. And he goes, sure. I said, and I had skis in the corner and a bunch of other, winter stuff. And I said, who knows? I mean, maybe we want to call it, I don't know, K2. And we looked at each other and chills ran up the back of our spine. We went, holy shit. And but sorry for swearing. I mean, it was literally lightning, yeah, up and down your spine. And so I
Mhm.
turned around and that's what we named it. And so we went down to 60 Worth Street and filed everything. And that's how we started, February of
So
1993.
you were the creative, and I know a lot of people know you for being a speaker. You've done stand-up comedy, and you got your podcast. So you do a lot of different things, but you're one hell of a talented graphic artist.
Oh,
And
thank
so
you.
I guess at the K2 agency, you were the creative director.
No, both of us actually were creative directors.
Oh,
And here's the funny part. We were two graphic designers at the time. And we started the company with our two Mac 2 CIs with 13-inch
mm.
VGA screens, tiny little screens. I don't have the eyesight to work on a 13-inch screen today.
Yes, I remember. I worked on that was my first when I was at the bike shop and I started doing all the marketing and stuff like that. It was
Yeah.
on one of those tiny all-in-one
Oh
little
my, that
Macs.
is so amazing. Well, here's a piece of advice for your audience. We literally bootstrapped this. We didn't have any money. I would freelance a little bit here and there, and we built the office. We actually renovated it ourselves. Um, Doug's brother-in-law came in and helped us build a staging area. We hooked up the two Mac 2 CIs, and we didn't have any electrical outlets. We had to plug the whole thing off of one outlet on the other side of the room, so
Oh.
we couldn't overdo it. Okay, and then we all this serendipity began to fall into place. So Doug and I had both been working in opposite ends of the design industry. Okay, he was doing high end corporate stuff, menus, and all the catalogs and everything you needed at hotels. So they had to be in New York City. You have people speaking 6, 7 languages coming in, so he had to do all this layout, same layout, 6 different times for 6 different languages. So he had this amazing print background. I had this corporate meeting background. So I was used to designing stuff that was going to go up on a billboard or a
Mhm.
Jumbotron or in the stadium. So we brought those two skills together. And one of the things I was really good at is presentation. And
Okay.
so that's what we did. So our first two clients that we got quite by accident was we had American Express Publishing hired us. We were doing their sales trainings, and they were flip charts. We were doing those, graphically. And then the second one was Banco Popular. And people don't realize this, but back in the 90s, Banco Popular fused with Banco de Ponce, and they became the largest bank in the Western Hemisphere.
Oh my goodness.
Huge, from Canada all the way down to South America. And so most of their depositors were Latino. And so we had to do all their bank applications and all this stuff in Nuyorican, it's called. So it's a lot of the population in New York City is Puerto Rican,
Mhm.
but they mix in a little bit of English and a little bit of slang. So it's actually called Nuyorican. So we had to hire somebody to do it in Nuyorican, and so it was amazing. Do you want to hear how we landed that account?
Yes, and make it a 2-minute version because I got so many questions I wanna ask you though, but
So
it is
Banco
interesting.
Banco Popular, Doug had a contact up there, and he was a older gentleman, and he called us up and he said, "Hey, I want you guys to design our apps. Okay, it's our applications and our brochures and all this and the new posters."
Mhm.
Remember, this is like '94. And so we went back, we did all these designs. We come up and we're wearing suits, but we didn't take it seriously. Well, we're standing in the lobby waiting for this guy to come out, and all of a sudden these two people get up and they go to leave and they say, "Hey, thank you." And we see them and he's escorting them out, and they shake hands. He introduces us to them and we're shaking hands, and they go to leave. And Doug looks at me and he goes, "Do you know who that was?" I go, "No, who?" He goes, "That's the largest design firm in New York City." This is a pitch fest. This is a pitch fest. So in other words, all day, 7 agencies are going to pitch, and
Mm.
we're the young guns who don't have a pot to piss in, don't have money in the bank, nothing. Here we are, and we get into this room, and it's a conference room. And Doug, he knows I know how to. I'm a good, pitch guy, but we didn't plan anything. And he goes, "We have two guys from Puerto Rico and two guys who are obviously from Massachusetts, Chase, and they don't like each other, and they've taken over Banco Popular, and now we got to pitch in front of these people who are a little
Oh.
agitated with each other." And so Doug goes, well, we came up with preliminary designs, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes, but I'm going to let Brad run the rest of the meeting.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
And I gave him that look that only friends who've known each other for years can give, where I'm like, you son of a gun,
You are
you.
dead.
So I pitched the whole meeting, and about a day or two later, we got a phone call, and they basically said, you won the account. And right away, that was like a $250,000 account
From
right out of the
0 to
gate.
250
Yeah.
in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's how we nailed that first one. But go
So
ahead,
there's
ask more. What else you want to ask
there's
me?
so many lessons there. First of all, you took the shot, and
Yeah.
I don't even know if you would have taken the shot had you known, but not being naive sometimes is a real blessing, right?
It is. I mean, we were competing against, we didn't even know this. We were competing against 4,000 other design firms in New York City for work. And it just never crossed our mind. We just go, we're going to start a company.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. What a
Yeah.
great story. I know. Well, was just staying on the design side of things because it's publicly not who you are, but you're still in demand on the back end. You recently
Yeah.
did some work for Damon John from the Shark Tank.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I've been working with Linda Johansson James. I help a lot of people with their personal branding,
Hmm.
because personal branding is not only hot, but 40% of a company's valuation is tied into the CEO's, brand online. If you can't Google them and can't find them, people don't invest. So I'm working with her, and she started creating a magazine, to as a funnel to get people interested in what she does. And what she does is she manages companies, retail space all across the United States and in France and around the world.
Hmm.
Barbell is one of her brands. If you go into a Barbell store and you see the staff there, Linda Johansson James Company International Retail staffs those places. So she wanted to do a magazine, and she knows a lot of famous people. And so her first magazine was done by somebody else, and they had Jane Seymour on the cover.
Okay.
And when you opened it up, there were like 400 typos in this first magazine. I said, you cannot do this. Who is doing your work? And I complained. And then they went to do the second magazine, and they had a completely different logo from one magazine to the next. I said, you can't do that anymore, Linda. I said, she goes, could you do it? I said, I don't want to do magazines anymore. And then, a month goes by. She goes, could you do the next magazine? I said, I don't want to do magazines anymore. And then she goes, could you do the magazine, please? I said, I will do the magazine. And she says, Damon's on the cover. And she's good
Wow.
friends with Damon John. So I'm like, yes, awesome. So they sent me a photo. And if you know anything about doing photo retouching or using it as an illustration, the photographer did a great job. I'm not knocking what he did, but he shot it outside, and
Hmm.
with that musty air, and it was under Dumbo, which is down under the Manhattan Bridge, on the Brooklyn side, and it was just not a great photo. It need a lot of retouching. So I took about a week or two,
Hmm.
and I enhanced everything. I took the bald, when somebody's bald on top, the light strikes it, and makes it white. I took that away, put a starburst behind it. I adjusted all the colors, and I sent it over. And originally, Linda just wanted me to have the cover, and then she begged me actually to do the rest of the magazine. So when I sent that over, Damon John's team just was like, "Oh wow," and Damon even reached out and said, "Hey, this is fantastic." And so that was the beginning of working with his team. I actually had to call them on Zoom. Zach, I had to speak to him, and Damon had just gone on a television show. He was on live, so I was working with his team, emailing him as well to get approval on certain things.
Hmm.
And it was just it was exciting because it's another level. I mean, I've worked with celebrities before, but Damon's story is the most unique because he, like you and me, he built it from scratch. He wasn't,
That's
born with a
right.
silver spoon in his mouth. And on the Shark Tank, he's become the entrepreneurs, the people's entrepreneur. And so
Yeah.
now I did the layouts for inside the magazine, and
Are
everything came
you
out.
kidding?
I did the whole magazine, which, when you're trained in New York design and you've been there for a number of years, it's really not that hard. It's just a matter of, you got to get the spreads right, and you got to know how to use type as a design element because
Mm.
design is very important when you use the type correctly. And so laying it all out, getting the typos out of there, the layout came out so good, Jim, that the company that printed the physical version of the magazine, they asked to use it in their portfolio, their permanent
Oh.
portfolio.
So how
it-
does that work? Do you have some kind of, do you have to sign off on that? I mean, do you own that retouched photograph?
all that, I mean, I created that art, so I can do
Okay.
whatever I want with it, as far as displaying and showing things. But hopefully I'm going to get Damon on my show, and any artwork I use for that, I just run it by his team and they give me approval, because they own the rights to every one of their photos, but they give us the rights to use it.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait to see Damon on your show.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
I
Because entrepreneur to
know.
entrepreneur. Because what's unique, his mom helped him. He did this on the kitchen table at his mom's house. And anybody who's been an entrepreneur, you have that dark night of soul, or that moment where you get knocked on your tuchus, to use a Yiddish word.
Yep.
And Damon had his mom. And I think we all, my dad was my biggest cheerleader, my biggest supporter. My mom was proud, but my dad gave me the business acumen. He was the one who's disciplined. I'm an artist. I could be all over the place if it wasn't for my dad's discipline. And you have your wife. You have Stephanie.
Yeah.
Stephanie is always there for you. So I think every entrepreneur, it's a rough road. I'm not going to lie to people. I've had a lot of failures as well. And it's that in those moments of darkness, who do you have that's your support structure that can say, hey, man, get back in the saddle, and it might be tough love too. It might not be like,
Yeah.
you're a jerk sometimes. You need to stand up and learn from this. It's like, okay.
So let's talk about your podcast, Awaken Nation.
Yeah.
So I started my podcast in 10 years ago, like 2012. And back then I thought, man, I am so late to the party. I didn't want and, Adam Homey, who been working with me for a long time,
Adam
said, all
Homey.
right, let's get this thing going. We need a name. And he goes, what should we call it? And I turned around and I looked at that book and I go, how about Stick Like Glue Radio? Right.
Stick Like Glue
So
Radio.
that's how it started. Of course, then, years later, I rebranded everything Dream Business Mastermind, Dream Business Coach. So we changed it. But what's interesting today is it seems like there's millions and millions and millions. And so I saw you launch Awaken Nation like 2 years ago, maybe?
4, actually. It was 2019. Yeah.
Time's flying.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about it is you're not afraid. You're not dictated by the clock, right? So if you go 45 minutes, in our case, we went an hour, but you'll go deep on a topic.
Yeah.
No offense if to whoever's listening, if this is your format, but if you were on a desert island, what video would you like to have? It's like, oh, these formulaic shows are just, but in a way, it's like, I appreciate you because it's my style also. If I get excited about a guest, I'm learning something, and I may have 6, 8, 10 questions I'm not going to get to, but like, I like to go deep on a story, right? Because, you've spoken at my events, Dream Business Academy. And one thing I've always taught people, entrepreneurs, is you want to be listening with one ear, just listen intently, but listen for opportunity with the other ear. So I'm always listening. Is this going to be good? Is this what my audience is digging? I can just picture them saying, yeah, go deep, Jim, or ask this or ask that. And you've really got that nailed down on, I'm sure there's a question here somewhere other than a giant ass compliment.
Well, here's how it got started. I was asked to be the host or the guest on probably over 100 podcasts.
Right.
And in business podcasting, it's the same darn story. It's like, do you know how successful I am? Yeah, I want to tell you how successful I am. And I'm like, I'm so bored with that conversation, because I always would find out off camera they had an alcohol issue and wound up going through 12 steps, or, during that time they lost their leg or they fell off a mountain. Those are the stories I wanted to talk about. And I didn't seem to have any support around me for that idea. And then Tony Rubleski asked me to be on a live, I guess it was a podcast back then, but he was recording it for his CD and for his group. You were on that podcast. Ben Gay III was on that podcast, and me. And Ben kicked it off by talking about the death of his son. I was like, whoa, okay, so we're going there. We're going into the failure. How do you get through that? Then you started talking about having skin cancer. And I'm thinking, well, what disease or loss have I had? I'm sort of like, a cruise ship full of people who've had open heart surgery. We're all comparing medicine. And the only thing I could remember is I was almost deaf as a kid. I had severe hearing problems as a kid. My ears would drain and got infected and all that. And then I broke my leg in high school on the football field during uh, band camp, and I realized the feedback that came from that show that was the highest rated show Tony had ever done. It got
Mm,
more likes, it got more listens. People started talking about it, and it was all because here are three supposedly successful people talking about extreme failure. We're not talking like, oh, I lost $5,000. We're talking skin cancer. Son got killed. I was honored to listen to you guys. I was just sitting there going, wow. And that's when I started to realize I want to have deeper conversations like that.
right.
And that's when I turned around and I had a business partner back then, and we were whiteboarding stuff. And I said, I want to call it something nation, because a nation is not just land, it's a
Right.
group of people who've come together. And we played with names, and Awakened Nation was born in May of 2019.
It's a great name. It's obviously got great graphics thanks to somebody, I guess,
Some guy.
some guy.
Whoa, it's
Some
crazy.
guy with a little Mac, right? Was
Yeah.
able to do that. But yeah, you know what? What's interesting to me is, and honestly, when I do this live or when I do, when I go on and I teach or do anything, it's like there's this formula, and I call it. I've heard other people say infotainment, so I didn't create that. But you
Right.
want to be informative and entertaining at the same time, and I don't mean like I'm not juggling like flaming
Yeah.
bowling pins,
Look
right?
at me. Look at
Yeah,
me.
but people are interested, and that's why I always try and start with the back. People are interested in that.
Yeah.
So unemployed 18 months, had cancer.
Yeah.
Took me an entire year to get my first paying client after I formed my own corporation, right?
Yeah.
All of that is interesting, especially to your audience. And so you do a really good job with that.
Thanks.
So besides me, who is like some of your biggest guests that you've had on Awaken
I've
Nation?
had Brian Smith, who founded
Wow.
Uggs,
Yeah.
and we had a great conversation. It's really a master class in sales and marketing and how to overcome failure, because he was kicked out of his own company. I don't know if you know this. And
Mm.
so he had to work very hard to get back in. I've had Ryan Estes on. I don't know if you know who Ryan is, but he is one of the top keynote speakers in the country. And he tells this great story of when his brother died. He was really upset, and he had to fly back home. And there was this woman at Starbucks that gave him the perfect cup of coffee, and
Wow.
that has become his keynote story. There, I have had Panache Desai on. He's a New York Times bestseller, sort of a guru type from India, and lived in England. And he and I just had a phenomenal conversation. I've also had on the founder of BNI, Ivan Meisner, Business
Yeah.
Networking International. He was phenomenal because we had this great conversation where I said, you were in a room with 800 sales reps, and you go, how many of you are here to sell something? And everybody's hand shot up. And he goes, how many of you are here to buy something? And nobody's hand shot up. And he goes, we have a problem. And that was a great show. So, and sometimes, the whole premise of the show is to really talk to people who've been through something extraordinary that knocked them on their butt,
Right.
either mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or physically, and they got back up, and they lived life differently. Like Dove Barron. Dove Barron fell 150 feet or 120 feet to his death, and he lived. He broke every bone in his body. He's had hundreds of recovery surgeries. He's
Mm.
now one of the Inc. magazine's top speakers in the world. Uh,
Wow.
it's just I've been astounded at the guests I've gotten on the show. Some are extremely famous. Some are just friends that I've known for years, not only in comedy, who have their own HBO specials. I've put them on as well. But I have regular friends who are doing outstanding work in the health areas, spiritualism, shamanism, healing. So it's really a deep dive into the extraordinary.
That's awesome. Hey, we're at the bottom of the hour, but I'm going to ask, with Brad's permission, I'm going to go 5 more minutes because I want to cover one more topic because he's like a
Sure.
multifaceted guest.
Yeah.
But so, Brad, I've had you
Multi.
speak at. I mentioned your book, Liquid Leadership. So you're like one of these speakers who understands like multi-generational workplace and
Yep.
stuff. Which to me, I don't remember that being an issue. You were either your dad or you were you, but now it's like 4 generations, 5
Yeah.
generations. So I've had you speak, as a matter of fact, at my event, Dream Business Academy. And one time I had you come in and give a speech about how to be a great speaker.
Yeah.
But anyway, you were talking another time about this multi-generational work environment, work that, I don't know what you call it, society that we're in. And
Yeah.
one of the things you held up a Viewmaster to make a point. There you go. Now, I had one of those as a kid. I remember
We
looking
all
at the
did.
there's the Grand Canyon, right? Click, click. And it's like that was like high-tech wizardry in
Yeah. It
1964.
was.
I don't know when, 65. But today, there are people, because I remember, from my wife who ran a very large daycare before we moved on to the boat. She was like, there are people that work for me that have no idea what it's like not to have a cell phone,
Yeah.
not to be able to go to an ATM, because we used to have to plan our life around Friday. Got to get to the bank
Yeah.
before 3 to have weekend money, right? All that different stuff. What kind of I will win an award someday for the longest questions. But anyway, what kind of challenges do companies today face when they're hiring team members?
Well, let me go back a little bit. K2, which we were talking about at the beginning, that grew into a multi-million-dollar company that we took public on NASDAQ.
Wow.
And I had 60 employees and I had offices
Is that
worldwide.
right? Wow.
I had an office in Dusseldorf, Germany, Washington, D.C., and in New York City. So, long story short, I'm a graphic designer. I'm a brand expert. I'm all these, I'm a creative director working with new technology. But I noticed back then, even our staff was starting to act weird. And I would pull aside my boomer business partners and they go, we have no idea what's going on. But our CEO, who was 3 years younger than me, he was like an alien. Okay. David Setner. And he knows, he laughs when I talk about this. But I realized they were all thinking differently. And in the back of my head, while I'm running the company, I'm thinking, I got to talk about this someday, because we have people who want to come in when they feel like it and they want to do work at home. And this is before we had Wi-Fi. Okay.
Yeah.
We had 56K modems when we were doing the Gary Kasparov Chess Challenge. We did some of the highest profile websites that you've ever seen at the time. If I rambled them off, you'd be like, you were the guys who did that? Yes, that was us. And so I just noticed my staff was nuts. And I thought, what is going on? So years later, I just started doing the research for my book, Liquid Leadership. And one of the places I went to was the Games and Learning Society, which brought together high-tech individuals who were building games with professors at colleges to figure out how to use games as a teaching tool. And that's when I got exposed to gaming. And I realized there were 3 components that had changed the next generation dramatically that we didn't know about. And I always hold, when I started my keynotes, Jim, people would sit in the back of the room and just have their arms crossed, like they needed to be paddled. That's the problem. That's all they said.
Yeah.
But I figured out a visual way to shut that down, that argument, and just go, hey, we think differently. And the first thing was I bring up a GAF Viewmaster and I go, this was the most interactive thing a boomer could use. And if the sun went down and the power went out, you couldn't use it. And that was replaced with this. And I hold up the Nintendo 64 first player, controller. And that's when everybody shuts up and listens. We have 5 generations in the workforce right now.
Wow.
Each one has very different needs, wants, and expectations. When you and I entered the work field, we would eventually get to a certain age where we would shut up, sit down, listen to our boss, and we would assimilate into the same thinking as the previous generation. That's over. This next generation, they've been raised on gaming. They've been raised on getting it done faster. The big complaint I hear in corporations is these younger generations, and by the way, they're 40 now, so we can't sit here and call them kids, but basically they're still playing video games when they go home at night. Okay. And when they come to work, They want to skip all those little details that a boomer might have go through to make sure that their work is done right the first time. So it looks like a boomer works slow, but they don't. And a younger generation, like somebody like Adam Homey embraces the technology right away and uses it, and boom, and leverages it. And boom, he's doing stuff that you and I don't know exists. We have to ask him.
That's right.
And so it's not that we aren't capable of learning that way. It's we weren't raised to be that way, to learn from those devices. So we think, I'm going to print a book. And they're thinking, no, I want to get it out digital content, do a video, do this. So it's different working styles. And I discovered it accidentally by running my own agencies, being an entrepreneur, noticing that one generation after another wasn't looking up to me just because I'd done all these amazing things. They're like, all right, grandpa, you know, and
so
they never guess my age. They always think I'm like Gen X or something. Like, dude, these boomers drive me nuts. They always tell me this. And I go, well, I'm a boomer.
So it's a great book. I've read it. I recommend it. If you're running a business and you're dealing with multi-generational issues, it's just very eye-opening. Some good practical advice. Brad, I could talk to you forever, but I have to monitor the clock. Unlike Awakened Nation, where you can go for 2 hours.
We ramble on my show. My show's about rambling.
So how can people connect with you? Where do you want them to go get the book? I know you got a new edition coming out, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
So
the
go
10th.
ahead
Hold on.
All right.
Dry throat. Just do Google Liquid Leadership. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. That's the old paper hardback edition. The new paperback edition, which is the 10th anniversary edition.
Wow.
We've updated it because I used to use Gen Y. Now we updated it with millennials. I also have a really fantastic foreword written by a good friend of mine, Todd Churches. Todd helped me develop my workshops to teach generational, cracking the generational code. So you can pick that up there. You can also email me at brad@liquidleadership.com. And I'm out there. Just, you can Google Awakened Nation, past tense, Awakened Nation. Or me, my name is spelled in the show notes or on the screen.
What are show notes? I don't do those now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brad, thank you so much. I knew this would be a lot of fun, a lot of value.
Jim.
Greatly appreciate you finally making time for me on my program. So
anytime,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. Have a good one, everybody.
Hey, folks, that wraps up this very special interview with my guest, Brad Szollose. I highly recommend you connect with him, follow him, learn from him. He's the real deal. He will serve you well with his information. You can connect with me if you care to do so at getjimpalmer.com. That is my home base. If you're interested in joining me and about 27 other smart entrepreneurs in the Dream Business Mastermind, that is Dream Biz Coaching, dreambizcoaching.com. And again, all as part of my legacy building program, which is going to be 2 years old in May coming up. You can get all 6 of my books for free in digital format as Kindle books on Amazon, as Nook books at Barnes & Noble, and they're also in the iBook store. It's not some promotion. They are free. That's the way I'm going to help serve a larger audience and still only work 3 days a week. Pretty important to me. But until this time next week, I am Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach. You take good care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.